Background screening providers exist to help employers find reliable and trustworthy employees. But when you're trying to decide what background screening firm to use, you need to be able to pull back the veil on sales and marketing claims. So today we wanted to get into exactly how employers can do that. We're here with our Vice President of Quality Service, Kevin Bachman, and President and Chief Operating Officer, Jason Morris. So Jason, what are some tips for, what employers should be looking for?
Well, I can't tell you how many employers that we walk into and we're reviewing their current program and they're using a different provider and their current program hasn't been looked at in years. And they're doing it that way because their predecessor had it set up that way and their predecessor had it set up that way. So I think first looking at an employer's program and giving them some tips on what they should or shouldn't be doing with their program and looking at why they might be doing some of those things. The second thing is, what type of statistics do they have? Are they showing a high hit ratio? Are they showing a low hit ratio? Is that employer out there just going with what the background screening company is telling them, or are they researching to make sure that they're really getting good data? I think those would be the two most important points. The third would be accuracy. Obviously, we've talked about accuracy today. And fourth, the quality of the information. Are they able to read the reports? Do they have somebody at the company when they call the screening provider that can explain the reports to them? They can explain the criminal records to them in a way that they can understand it.
Yeah. Kevin, who at an organization should be involved in kind of determining what is needed from a screening provider?
A great question. And I think back to some of Jason's points that he just made, and a word just keeps jumping out in my mind, and that's engage. So when you ask who should be involved, look within the organization. Who are the stakeholders as part of the process? The HR team, the security team, the IT team. This is confidential information that we're dealing with: names, dates of birth, social security numbers. Identify the stakeholders, assemble a team to evaluate the process, and do a 360-degree approach to this. It's one thing to take an RFP, blast it out to 20 different background screening companies, chop off the 18 with the highest price, invite the 2 lowest guys in, and make the decision on the basis of that. It's another thing to dive in, tackle some of the things that Jason just pointed out, and really look for a solution that works best for your organization.
Somebody's got to own the process. There has to be a team that's involved, obviously security and HR, but somebody's got to own the process. I can't tell. We were just at a sales meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about the new EEOC guidelines, and we're talking about ban the box. And they said, well, we use an applicant tracking system. I'm sure the ATS will go ahead and remove that box when they get around to it. Well, no, they're not going to. Someone needs to tell them to do that. So when you have IT things involved, and security things involved, loss prevention things involved, and HR things involved, you need to make sure somebody's responsible at the company for being in charge of dictating what should or shouldn't happen.
And it's all layers too, because it's not just the managers, it's not just the people that make the selection, it's the people that actually use the product too.
Sure.
So making sure that you're getting a good cross-section of those stakeholders. Yeah.
Exactly. I talk about building that team. Jason talks about identifying who's in charge, and really those two have to go hand in hand. You do ultimately need one person as part of the process that knows how does the legal compliance touch the integration that we want to do with our current ATS, with the day-to-day needs of our hiring systems? I just described 4 different things. There has to be one person that understands all 4.
And we learned some really interesting information a couple weeks ago, and that is, the RFP, it's important. You have to have good questions. You have to get good answers to your questions. But from our understanding and talking with a lot of people, that only is the tip of the iceberg. Do you want to elaborate on that?
I mean, it is, and we have so many RFPs that we'll fill out and they'll say, can you do this? And it's a yes or no question. And well, the answer is usually yes, but then you get around to execution and they're like, well, you said you can do this. And we say, well, you didn't exactly tell us how you wanted it done. We have 1,000 questions we need to ask you on how to implement it. It always can be done, but you want to make sure that when you're using the RFP as a center point, as a kickoff, to all the other important questions that happen. You got to make sure there's an implementation team there. You're looking at every aspect of the background check from start to finish with that team, and make sure that we all understand and have expectations when we go in.
Yeah, it's a great question, a great answer, and as I'm prone to do from time to time, I'll make things a little more complicated. A client who says, great, you're my provider, I want to do business with you, that's often just the start of the process that Jason described a little bit. It's one thing to evaluate a screening provider and develop the broad guidelines of a program to do 10,000 background checks a year. It's another thing to get in and identify the operational practices and procedures for when something happens to this candidate on this day to this hiring manager. Both of those approaches need to be considered and thought of by employers when they make these decisions.
Right.
Yeah, and there's this whole notion of apples to apples comparison. So what advice do you have for employers that are comparing different companies? What's the best way to figure out what's what?
Yeah, I've learned a lot in the last several years from Kevin about statistics. I think statistics prove a lot of things, and we know from our statistics what certain industries should have as far as hit ratios and discrepancy ratios, and it amazes me that we walk into companies and they say, well, our hit ratio is 7%, and they're in the manufacturing industry, and we know that number should be around 30 or 40. We know right then and there they don't have a good program, and it's very easy for us to explain what they're missing. And we have some great examples that we use in those situations, and it really blows people away.
Right, but explain, and now let's talk about demonstrate. How is it demonstrated? Because you can tell anybody anything. Now, how's it demonstrated?
It's all in the numbers. And again, we do a lot of camps, and we know that sex offenders want to put themselves in situations where they're with kids. They know they want to do that. So you throw 100 sex offenders into a room, and they all apply for the same job. Well, we know that some of our people that we're talking to, if they're only finding a 7% hit ratio, 93 people are going to work for them that have criminal records that they're not going to know about. We know from our statistics that we're going to find the most people to disqualify them to make sure they're not putting themselves in harm's way.
Yeah, and Nick, to your question, how do we demonstrate it?
Yeah.
For our clients, one background check at a time. We feel we have to earn our clients' business on each and every background check. As a company, you're right. They don't know. Our marketing materials are glossy, so are our competitors. Our website's good, so are our competitors. So we take the approach that if given an opportunity, every single background check is a standalone background check. As part of the evaluation process, I'll go back to the word I said at the beginning, engage. Ask questions.
We had a great conversation on Friday. A client called and said, we had a contractor that worked here twice. Our previous provider never found anything, and you found 3 felonies. What do we do? I don't know. It's never happened with us.
Yeah.
So I think demonstrating the actual validity of the records is paramount.
So the solutions we're talking about do make the process a bit more complex, but ultimately it's that front end work that creates that back end great screening program.
Right.
Simply taking a number of different providers, lopping off the top 18 again, choosing the 2 cheapest and picking one of them. That's not the best way. That's an easy process, but it's not the best screening program. Right. Now, my point isn't to say that cheap is always worse and expensive is always better. My point is expand the scope of the criteria that you're considering and evaluate your program on the basis of those things.
Different people, and you know this, Nick, different people, different stakeholders in the process have different goals. Sourcing's goal is to get the best deal they can. HR's goal is to find a good price, but also to make sure they can hire people quickly. Loss prevention and security wants to make sure that it's the best possible program and making sure that they're really securing the company. So I think all the different stakeholders need to have a say, and those need to be equal.
Are there any, sorry, I apologize, are there any certifications out there that people should be looking for that will help them determine, who should we be talking to?
There is an accreditation program out there from the National Association of Professional Background Screeners, NAPBS, that launched such a program 3 years ago. And less than 2% of our competitors are accredited, as we are. And it's important to make sure that you're certifying the company that you're choosing, really is who they say they are. Just like you're doing a background check on your employees, make sure that your screening provider is doing everything they say they're doing. And that accreditation program has an independent auditor coming in and making sure they're actually, salting their vendors and making sure that they've got the best vendors out there, their contracts are in line. All of these different aspects are part of that program, and it's really important to make sure if they're not accredited, that they're still following those standards.
Yeah. So to wrap up on this, we've developed a list of what we consider to be the fundamental 5 things that employers ought to be looking for. Those things are demonstrated experience, legal compliance and client education, consumer protection and information security, quality and accuracy, and lastly, product evaluation. So we think that if those areas are addressed, be it through an RFP, be it through having in-person interviews, be it through a test before they engage the services of background screener, those are the best practices that companies ought to be looking for. If you're interested in learning more about tips on how to select a screening provider, please visit our website at www.employeescreen.com. We've got plenty of white papers on that topic.